you have to submit it in PDF form. So here, our due date is on the 18th, Saturday. Ako ta siya i-try o next meeting, but I think gamay ra og time and I don't know if you have other deadlines also sa inyong other class. So I'll give you enough time to do the sketching. You have to do it in manual sketch ha. Manual sketching para ma-register good mayo sa inyong brain ang inyong gihimo. Okay, so it says here time remaining, so you have 4 days and 6 hours. Okay, any questions so far? If you have questions, just let me know no, sa ato ang skis number 1. Wala na question. Okay. I'll check on it before. If malate, it's 0.2 per meeting. Before no sa mga. I don't know if there's a standard now in the department. We'll have a department meeting later this evening after our class. So I might as well check with other instructors para standard ang deduction. But in my design class, I'll have it as 0.2 per day. Per day ang per day ba to? Wala pa na ako na-establish actually. So I'll check on it. Rendered, it depends. If kaya ninyo one line drawing lang inyong makaya sa inyong skill, could be one line, but pwede sa if kanang shaded lang, shade and shadows. Sa among times una, naman sad may mga skis kana mga sketching. Naiuban mag pointillism. Dagan sila time actually. Ay lang sad yan kanang naning dasad kay nga pointillism nimo. The essence of that skis is you know the layout, you know the form itself, the plan, you know the section, and you know the parts. The most important part is you know the parts of the church. So kabaw ka asa ang apse, asa ang bema, asa ang transept, asa ang narthex, and so on and so forth. Okay. Other questions before tamo properly start? By the way, na-view ninyo ang video, the YouTube link that I've forwarded. Siguro wala pa no kay gamay rag time, or do you have other class also? Kasi ni nakakita sa YouTube link or naka-view kahit okay, so na. Very good. That's good. Okay, so we'll start our discussion. Today we will discuss Byzantine architecture. This is just a continuation of what we've discussed last meeting, which is a week ago. So we all know that Byzantine architecture happens after the early Christian architecture. So same with early Christian architecture, it also started with Emperor Constantine. So siya mo yung nag-start sa Byzantine architecture. So geographical influence in Byzantine architecture is located in Byzantion, or it could be called also Byzantium, which is later named after the Emperor Constantine the First. So gihimo niyang Constantinople, and then now it is Istanbul. So for the geological influence, unsay naa nila ngadto sa Byzantium or Constantinople is they have bricks. Muna naa nila bricks, but they don't have good stones. So what do we do is ila pa ng ikwari. For the climatic influence, mostly Turkey or the Byzantium area is ano na siya, init na lugar. Dry. So, they have flat roofs, small windows, and so on and so forth. Religious, so influence is the Christianity. Social influence is, this is based on the parang crew or people nga gidala ni Constantine, ni Emperor Constantine. So they transferred from Rome, transferred sila sa Constantinople. General characteristics, we have here feeling of verticality, so patas anay na during this time of Byzantine architecture, but simple ra gyapon ang ilahang exterior. No? So exterior, simple, which is same sa early Christian. So again, no, early Christian, horizontal siya, palapad. Here in Byzantine architecture, patas anay na no, vertically. And in interior, richness in interior elements. So ilagya pong bawion sa ilahang interior design. And the most, or ang pinaka-distinct good for the Byzantine architecture, when you compare Byzantine architecture and early Christian architecture is, naa na siya dome, or the domical construction here. Have we started recording this? Yes. Thank you no sa nag-record. Thank you. Okay, naay nag-message na di siya ka-attend kay not feeling well, no? So hopefully ma-view niya na itong mga recordings. Okay. So medyo paspas lang ni siya akong discuss kay run through raman ni, no? Sa katong absent last meeting, na-discuss na namo ni siya. So run through na lang ni of what we've discussed last meeting. So next, principal materials, bricks and concrete. So again, no, principal materials which is present in the Byzantium or the Byzantine era, bricks and concrete. So concrete, they get it from the Roman Empire. The technology was from the Roman Empire. So buildings, unsa may buildings for Byzantine architecture, duha ra, no? We have the churches and the monasteries. So example here, Hagia Irene. Nayuban, they will pronounce it as Hagia. Pero the proper way of pronouncing it is Haya, meaning holy. Here we have the monastery or the Daphne Monastery. So there are two, monastery and church. If you compare it to early Christian, if you remember it, if wala pa nyo nalimtan atong lesson, ang early Christian duha ra sad, church and the baptistry or baptistery. Here duha ra sad, na one is the church, second is the monastery. System of construction is just the same actually with early Christian, but ang nidungag is ang domical. So if you compare it, compare nimo no, early Christian versus Byzantine, columnar and trabeated, check. Arc and vault, check, same na sila. The third one, domical ang Byzantine architecture. So unsa man siya sa early Christian. In early Christian architecture, they use truss, naka-truss ilang roofing. So here, in Byzantine architecture, naka-domical. So since it is domical, it has a great or big effect on their plan. Kay, syempre, if I missketch it, if you're having this, in early Christian architecture, if you're having this rectangular plan, very big rectangular plan, you can't have a dome here, you can't have a dome directly above that one, diba? So that is why what they did is, di na din ni ma-erase. Here. What they did in their roofing is naka-truss roofing sila. So in top view, ilang roofing is gable. So naka-truss roofing na sila. That is in early Christian architecture. But in Byzantine architecture, they have it in dome or domical roofing or roof. So That dome roof or domical roofing greatly affects the plan. So if you notice, the ilang plan is kind of squarish or cross or even circle or even octagonal. So for the plans, centrally planned church, meaning nasa tunga, no? This one here at the center, the circle one, that's the nave. If you notice, the early Christian architecture, the nave is elongated. So from the narthex up to the apse or up to the transept mo na ang nave, pa straight. This one here, the nave is kind of circular or nasa tunga, no? Centrally planned. Cross and square plan for a cross, square, dome type of architecture. Okay? So, ingana na ilahang forma sa plano. So, if you notice, the names here, the parts are still the same with early Christian architecture. So, the nave, the aisle, the apse, the transept. This one, added lang ni siya, sacristy. Actually, sacristy is it's a room in Christian churches wherein they place their valuable things. Ang kanang ilang mga gold cups, sa panadihan nga mga valuable things, they have to store it in the sacristy. So again, no, it's just the same parts of the church: narthex, nave, aisle, transept or bema, apse, altar, baldacchino. So those terms can also be included in your sketches. No? Dili kaila, sir. Ang naa sa presentation ni sir kay narthex naman to or nave. So or aisle. What if na side aisle pag yun? So again, no, the parts of the church in terms of floor plan, early Christian and Byzantine architecture are just more or less the same. No, nalaiuban nga medyo lahi siya in terms of the name itself or added room, added features of church, but mostly the main parts of the church are the same. So Byzantine architecture, what do they use in their walls? Bricks. Nakita ninyo, no? Bricks ang gamit. Others use stone, pero gikwari na nila nga stone. It's not from the Byzantine or Byzantium. They quarry it. They transport it from other areas. For the openings, semicircular arches here. Ano siya na? Semicircular arches. Next, for the roofing, methods of roofing, we have the domes. And there are several types of domes. If you remember this one, we have the simple domes. So simple domes. We have the compound domes. We have the melon-shaped dome. Number 4, we have the serrated. Number 5, we have the onion or the bulbous sharp dome. So here, based on this definition, simple, we have the pendentive and domes are part of the same sphere. So we have here, no? Ang simple dome magod is it could be a dome itself, kanang from a circle, or if you would visualize it, if na kay orange na fruit, if you cut it in half, na kay dome, na kay domical figure. So that's a simple dome. In Byzantine architecture, they've created a dome. Di ba, inigtanaw niyo sa orange nga yung giputol. Lingin ang iyahang sa center, di ba? Ang iyahang kanang inigputol nimo lingin ang ma-create. In Byzantine architecture, they've created this square plan ang ilang base. So it's quite during that time, if you look at the video katong sa YouTube, they really plan or they really studied how to do it from squarish, and put a dome on top of it. So what do? They added this term pendentive. So that triangular portion right here, that's the pendentive. Okay, so for the compound dome, ilan na nang combine, no? So they have the dome and the pendentives. Here, the pendentive with drums, napagay drum, and we have the dome on top. So this vertical part, more ka ng cylindrical part, that's the drum itself. This one here. So this one is just a representation of the dome in a elevation view. So since na perfect na nila or they've created those compound domes, later ang mga architects or mga designers during that part, medyo nalingaw na sila sa ilang pag-create of domes. Because during this Byzantine architecture, diri ni sikat ang paghimo og dome. If you noticed, before Roman architecture, Greek architecture, I think usara ang naay dome, which is the Pantheon. So later on, we will discuss that. How did Pantheon influence Byzantine architecture? Remember, Pantheon in the Roman architecture, katong palingin, no? May naisulat Agrippa on the front side. So during this time, kani late Byzantine era na ni siya. It could be late Byzantine or part na ni siya sa Islamic. Not all Byzantine have this kind of domes already, this special designs. Some of the domes here, kani siya mga melon dome, serrated, nga murag twirl, no, ice cream, something cone on a twirls. And this onion or bulbous dome. You cannot see this type of domes in Byzantine architecture. Gi-include lang ni diri siya para makita nga what are the types of domes. But in terms of application of domes during the Byzantine architecture, only this one, dome on drums and dome on pendentives. So asa man din nagigamit, sir? Melon dome, serrated, and onion or bulbous sharp. Gigamit na ni siya in Islamic architecture. Just later on, I don't know if we can tackle Islamic architecture or that's part of another history subject. I think history 3 or 4. But siguro we can have some few examples later on. So for the columns, gamit sa nila, no? Actually, columns, if you compared Roman, Greek, let's start from Greek, Ionic, diba? Corinthian, and so on and so forth. During the Roman, ilahang enhance, no? I think mostly Roman architecture gigamit og mga Corinthian na capitals. During Byzantine architecture, ilang enhance og maayo. They made it as intricate as possible, as detailed as possible, as more ornaments compared than previous type of architecture. Bali ang ilahang effort diha nila gipakita sa ilahang capital on top of the columns. Okay, so for the moldings, uban igamit og moldings, but mostly gamay lang, no, ang mga moldings nga gamit. Here are examples of the capitals, no, that were used in Byzantine architecture. So if you notice, dili na siya literally matawag di mo nga Ionic na, sir, or Corinthian, diba? Na sila ilang kagalingon nga type of capital. And there are a lot of this one. If you want to really study, kanang deeply study history of architecture, yung ganahan jud kagid nga, you have to study each and every detail of this one. Makita nimo ni siya sa Fletcher na book, The History of Architecture by Sir Bannister Fletcher. Makita ni siya kaning examples. Okay. So for the ornaments, no, aside from the capitals, kanang sa ilang columns, aside from sa ilang molding sa walls, they also provide ornaments sa ilang flooring. So makita nimo sa mga old churches na to, napagyapon ni siya, makita gyapon ni siya nga mga patterns. And also sa ilang mga paintings, ilang mosaics, the way they represent the before manggod, dili pa kayo, or I think there's a part wherein they're not allowed to have statues. Kanang wala bitay statua, kanang. So what they do is they create mosaics, paintings, murals, which is mostly in fresco type. Meaning anong fresco is basa pa ang plaster, di ba? Plaster nimo sa imong wall, basa pa. Ilang i-paint dayon. So that's what you call fresco. Okay, so I think ngarita ni stop. Wait lang ha. Just give me a minute. Okay, sorry, I'm back. So I think narita ni start, no? Or we discussed a portion of the terminologies. Here, most of the terms here are from the Visual Dictionary of, I think from spelling and dictionary na. So this is from the Visual Dictionary of Architecture by Dickie Ching. So sa katong mga wala pa'y copy, kindly check sa ato ang general notes na makita ninyo nga nga files. You can download it, or for those nga ganahan gyud og hard copy, you can buy it. I think available online na kay mapalit. Visual Dictionary of Architecture. Again, no, it's one of the books na pwede niyo magamit as reference in terms of the terms na gamiton. And also during board exam, importante nga naani siya nga book. First term we have here is pendentive. So sikat ang pendentive during Byzantine architecture because it was invented during the Byzantine architecture. So kani siya nga type, kani siya nga part sa building was invented during the Byzantine architecture. So what does it mean, pendentive? It's the triangular curve overhanging surface by means of which a circular dome is supported over a square or a polygonal compartment. So again, no, nganong naay pendentive during the Byzantine architecture? Because they opted to have a square plan, rectangular plan, and have a dome. So from here, if makita ninyo, rectangular or squarish ang iyang plan, they need to have this pendentive, this triangular part na mo curve, usa makahimo sila og dome. So if you watch that documentary, siguro if na mo time this evening or siguro tomorrow, kindly watch it and check kung giun sa atin na pagbuhat ang dome. Another term we have here is drum. So pendentive, part of that kanang sa ilahang dome is from the pendentive, pwede ka mo dome directly, but there are other churches or buildings na after sa pendentive, ila pang i-extend. Because again, no, the theme during Byzantine architecture is patas-anay sila, no? Verticality. So mas taas imong building, mas taas imong church, ikaw ang mas sikat during that time. Okay, so how do they extend more? So they will provide drum. Yang nasa lay cylinder nga mo extend up. Okay, so what does it mean? Drum, a round or polygonal wall below a dome, often pierced with windows. Okay, so makita niyo na yung mga windows, na yung mga window openings. Another term we have here is minder or labyrinth fret. So unsa may meaning anang fret? So actually fret are just patterns, pero gitawag na siya endless patterns. That means wala siya kasapusan, meaning pwede ka magtuyok-tuyok. It's just like a maze. So gitawag na siya og fret. Patterns. Another term we have is chevron or the herringbone pattern. So if you notice, no, na yung mga tiles nga naka-chevron pattern, so ingani ni siya. So how do they applied it during the Byzantine architecture? They applied it on their arches. Nice chevron nga to. And still, up to now, nigamit ta og kaning type of pattern, this one, the chevron pattern. So for modern buildings, we can see some patterns. Uban gamiton tiles, ceramic tiles. Uban pwede mo gamit wood or uban metals. We could have it in chevron pattern. Another term is centering. So what is a centering? So it's a temporary structure upon which the materials of a vault or arc are supported in position until the work becomes self-supporting. So again, no, the term is centering, a temporary structure upon which the materials of a vault or arc are supported in position until the work becomes self-supporting. So today, kani siyang centering, mo na siya gitawag nato og scaffolding. Kana bitaw magbuhat ka og mga uban made of metal, uban made of coco lumber, or Aside from scaffolding, hindi mo siya buhaton, hindi mo siya kanang formworks, no? Kanang sa imong slab and so on and so forth. So before gitawag siya og centering. Naasad ni siya sa video class. No? If you watch that video, what they did on that video, man God, is there's a group of researchers or mga historians, and what they do is they checked how the Hagia Sophia or the Hagia Sophia was constructed before. So how do they do it? How do they study it? They've created a model, no, gamay nga model, miniature, and ilang gi unsay tawag ani? Murag ilang gi recreate ang pag-construct sa Hagia Sophia. So which is quite interesting for me na if matanaw mo atong video. So this one, I think na-discuss na ako ni last meeting, no? Parts of a arc, which I think very familiar tayo mo guys. No? Annulets, a small molding, usually circular in plan, and square or angular in section, especially one of the fillet, encircling the lower part of the Doric capital above the necking. So, kani siya, no? Annulets. May arrow. This one, minaret. So, a tall tower in or contiguous to a mosque with stairs leading up to one or more balconies from which the faithful are called to prayer. Okay, so if you quite notice, minaret is present in Byzantine architecture. But there are some Byzantine architecture churches, di ba sa Byzantine architecture, Christian man na siya, no? Christianity. Gigamit ang mga churches or Byzantine architecture buildings during the Christian na murag pag-boom sa Christianity in Byzantine era. But partly, I think lots of churches during the Byzantine era was converted into mosque. And one of them is the Hagia Sophia. So Hagia Sophia is from a Christian church, converted siya into a mosque. And since ang Hagia Sophia is one of the most beautiful building during the Byzantine architecture, this minaret was copied, ikopya nila during sa Islamic architecture. And patas-anay na sila og mga minaret. Okay, so what does this mean, the minaret? A tall tower in or contiguous to a mosque or church, so pwede nimo butangan ng church, with stairs leading up to one or more balconies from which the faithful are called to prayer. So before, ang minaret is kanina gamito na siya pang munay mo saka gyud ngadto nga tawo. So they will use the stairs, no? Saka sila diri and so on and so forth, abot sila diri. This one here nanay balcony. Ngadto mo siya git ang tawo nga misa na ta guys. Ngadto na mosulod ang mga tawo sa church. And nowadays, wala na nay tawo mo siya git naka-speaker na lang na ngadto. Here we have a dosseret block, so a deep block sometimes placed over a Byzantine capital in order to support the wide voussoirs of an arc or vault. So again, no, if you notice, dili na ni siya Ionic, dili na ni siya Doric, dili na ni siya Corinthian, but it's kinda mixed and well ornamented. So, ilan na nagipang mix ang type of capitals, and what they do is they created their own style, they created their own design, and have it as the main feature of their columns. Next, we have lantern. So, lantern is a windowed superstructure crowning a roof or a dome. So, a tower or a cimborrio raised above a roof and pierced to admit light. So ang main purpose ani niya is to admit light within sa dome. Mostly, the domes that have this kind of kaniyang lantern is katong walay drums. Why? Let me sketch this one. Ano na siya? Elevation view. If this is the church, if this is the dome, you don't have a capacity to provide windows in this part. Like if mo na imong church, do kani imong church. I don't know if masabtan nyo kung sketch. So what do they do is provide sila lantern nga rin. Sorry, Skyra challenged using my mouse as pang sketch. So mo na siya, no? They provided this lantern para makasud ang light sa dome. But if you've created your dome with drums already, so this is your pendentive right there. This is your church. Drums, you have this drums, and then you have this window. Nakay window on your drums. So no did nakamubutang og additional lantern. That's the usual design in Byzantine architecture before. They've created this lantern para to admit light. Okay. Another term is cimborio. So cimborio, a lantern or cupola above or nearly above the high altar in Spanish architecture. So gitawag siya cimborio. So naka sa altar, tanaw ka sa taas. Oh, na din ni dome on drums nga rin sa taas. That is cimborio. Another term, squinch arc. What does it mean? A small arc across the corner of a square room which supports a superimposed mass, also called sconce. So kani siya, no? Squinch. So it is very typical in Byzantine architecture because kani siya nga type of arc mo ni nag-support sa dome. So if you notice here, no? This is the base of the dome. This is the part nga, circular part na siya. Pa-circle na siya, that's the base of the dome. After that, dome na sa taas. Here, this is the triangular part. This is the pendentives. So this arc right here, after the pendentives, kaning sa corner, kaya ang ilahang plano before sa Byzantine architecture is squarish or rectangular. So this part right here, kanang mo support ani nga arc. This one is what you call the squinch. So a small arc across the corner of a square room which supports a superimposed mass, or also called, another term niya is sconce. Okay, so if makita ni siya ninyo sa inyong mga sketches, like if you have sketches during the skis, makita ni siya sa inyong sectional view, inyo lang i-note na to, squinch, or it could be also called a sconce, this one. Another term na ako lang gikuha, no, from the Visual Dictionary of Architecture is oculus. So unsa man ang oculus? So a circular opening, especially one at the crown of a dome. So since we're talking about dome, again, no, Byzantine architecture, daghan kay silang dome. If you would compare Byzantine architecture compared to early Christian architecture, the main difference is actually the dome. Mura kag, you have that early Christian vibe, early Christian type of architecture, and you add a dome. So that is Byzantine architecture. So the dome during the Byzantine architecture is actually based on the dome made during the Roman architecture, which is the Pantheon. So if you notice ang katong building sa Pantheon during Roman architecture, na siya buslot diri sa taas. That opening or that circle right there is what you called oculus. Another term which is ato naning na-discuss, cupola, a light structure on a dome or roof serving as a belfry, lantern, or belvedere. And another term is tambur. So makita sa niya ninyo no, sa Visual Dictionary of Architecture. So if I may screenshot a photo of a Visual Dictionary of Architecture, makita na siya. Na. So all of this part, no, katong ilang gidungag on top of that dome, it could be called lantern, cupola, tambur. Pwede rin, it's either of the three. But to be specific, lantern is a superstructure crowning a roof or dome having opened or windowed walls to let in light and air. And lantern is just the same with cupola. A light structure on a dome or roof serving as a belfry, lantern, or belvedere. So lantern or cupola, it's actually the same. But tambur is a part. So this vertical part right here, the vertical portion is the tambur. So the vertical part of a cupola. Okay, so I think this is page 60 plus in your Visual Dictionary of Architecture. Check lang ninyo nga to. Ang Visual Dictionary of Architecture, it is not arranged by kanang letters bitaw, like for example, like the dictionary, letter A tanang term, letter B tanang term. It's not arranged like that. It's arranged by section. So it arranged like, for example, church, the topic about church. So all of the terms about church is within that section. So dili ka mangita nga the same way ka mangita ka sa Webster's dictionary. So what you will do is you will find the term on the rear portion of the book, pinakalikod, nangadto ang index part. So ngadto na naka itemize lahat ng terms and naka-alphabetical na siya ngadto. Another term here, makita ninyo, interdome, the space between the inner and outer shells of a dome. So makita sa inyo siya sa video, this interdome. Here, another term, semi-dome, half a dome formed by a vertical section as over a semicircular apse. So semi-dome, this one. We will discuss this later, why they've created this semi-dome. Another term we have here, cul de four. Cul de four. So a semi-dome or quarter sphere vault as over an apse or niche. So here, na. Pwede ka ng 1/4 lang, no? Quarter sphere vault as over an apse or niche. So later on, we'll discuss what's the use of this semi-dome, cul de four. Later on, we'll discuss. If we will present na the examples. This one, piazza. Actually, plaza rin siya, no? Kanin siya nga term. This is called plaza or piazza. So a public open space or square surrounded by buildings. So again, no? Piazza or plaza, it's a public open space or square surrounded by buildings. So this one is an example of the Piazza Venetia in Italy. So since gamay na lang ang during Byzantine architecture, the way they designed their church is kind of small. It's because they're it's not really small, but if you compared it during the early Christian architecture is very economical in terms of its plan because you can elongate the whole thing, provide truss roofing. So pwede ka padakon ni mo maayo. But during Byzantine architecture, their challenge is if you have a bigger square plan, or bigger rectangular plan, the next question is, can it handle a bigger dome? Because dome construction is actually very, very intricate. Lisod kayo. No. Very, very intricate before. Right now, grabe sad kalisod ang pag-construct og dome. So if you're familiar with Buckminster Fuller, are you familiar with Buckminster Fuller? Okay. Are you familiar with this architect? I don't know if akong spelling. I type it on the chat. Buckminster Fuller is one of the architects, I think engineer sa siya, partly engineer or nag-study sa siya structural engineering. Siya yung nagpasikat sa geodesic dome. So it's the dome, another type of dome, but made of rectangles. So rectangles, rectangles, and so on and so forth. Okay. So now we will discuss, so far, any questions on the terms from the Visual Dictionary of Architecture? So far, wala. Now we will discuss this one, kani mga examples. Since 6:30 na, I think pwede na ta mag-break sa siguro. We'll have our snacks, water break kadali, then we'll be back at around 6:45. Okay, guys? So, your snacks. Balik ta mga 6:45. Okay? Asa may padung si Finelia. Hello, guys. If you have questions, just let me know. Hello? Hello? Okay, so we'll continue. Hopefully, naka-snacks mo guys or naka-bathroom break or water break. It's okay, Finelia. Don't worry. So far, you have questions. So again, hopefully, you've understand all the terms, all the characteristics of the Byzantine architecture. Uh, Next meeting, we will continue our discussion about Romanesque architecture, and at the same time, we'll have our quiz for Byzantine architecture. So para namoy ang inyuhang output for this subject before the midterm exam is you have 2 quizzes and 2 skis. So dili lang ta mag-quiz for the Romanesque para ang inyuhang pag-study during the midterm exam is ano na siya, from early Christian to Romanesque. So what we'll have is quiz na ta for early Christian architecture, which is upan ako na return. Don't worry, ma-return ako na siya within the week. We'll have our quiz for Byzantine architecture. Same ra guys, na easy lang siya, same sa early Christian architecture. Nga to nga type sa exam akong ipang hatag. And for the midterm exam, wala pa ko naka-start o create. I think I will start creating it by weekend, this weekend. So again, what we'll have is we have 2 quizzes before the midterm exam. So ang usa ka quiz na human na. Our next quiz, which is next meeting Thursday, our topic is only Byzantine architecture. And you have 1 skis na deadline on the Saturday. Another skis, Romanesque architecture, deadline after the midterm exam na, after na sa midterm exam. Okay? So to continue, our next portion or the next part of our discussion is examples na lang ni siya. These are examples of Byzantine architecture. So let's start with the most beautiful buildings during the Byzantine architecture, the most popular, the landmark of Turkey. If you talk about Byzantine architecture, nothing else comes to mind than the Hagia Sophia or Hagia Sophia. So makita ninyo, this is one of the most gorgeous buildings in the world. Actually, UNESCO heritage na ni siya nga building. Okay. So Byzantine architecture, this one, the Church of Hagia Sophia, built by Justinian. Justinian is an emperor. So ingani ang naitabo, during the time of Constantine, di ba siya may nag-start sa early Christian, at the same time siya ay nagsugod sa Byzantine architecture. So during the time, ni improve ang architecture along Byzantium or Constantinople, and they've created the Church of Hagia Sophia during the time of Constantine. But there's a riot that happens. Naay nag-away kay pa-down naman, no, murag I think nahuman na ang era ni Constantine. So what happens is nisulod si Justinian the first, I think this is Justinian the first, as an emperor, but pagsulod niya as an emperor, naay ni oppose and riot, gitawag na siya Nika riot. That riot kills thousands of people during the time. Kanang gitawag nila Nika riot. And the Hagia Sophia church was destroyed. And this is not the church, no. Napay old ani nga church na destroyed ang kato nga church. So since nidaog si Justinian, si Emperor Justinian during that riot, ang ilang ka-riot is ang ni-oppose ni Justinian, no? Nidaog si Justinian during that time. So what he did is iyahang reconstruct or start from scratch, completely destroyed ang buildings during the time, no? completely destroyed ang Hagia Sophia. So what did Justinian do? Ni create siya og landmark actually. Okay, so kinsay architects ngayang ani nga time si Anthemius ug si Isidorus. Naiuban i-memorize nila but if you could familiar these two, so these are the architects na nagdraw sa Hagia Sophia. So for the floor plan, the plan consists of a central space 107 feet square with 4 massive stone piers. So 25 by 60 feet. So actually, I haven't experienced a board exam with numbers or sizes of an old buildings. So siguro na uban ganahan nga memorize ang height, ang width, ang area, but mostly dili na kay na siya nga needed na information. Siguro you could have that information by yourself. Like for example, you have to research more on the Hagia Sophia. It's actually good no na namo na type of information, but dealing much deeper onto it, dili na kay na siya nga nakagamit. Okay. So for our next slide, it says here, Hagia Sophia, the most famous and most spectacular example of Byzantine architecture, was built between 532 and 537. So that means, pila ka years siya gihimo pa? 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 32. Actually, nag-start siya 32. So 6 years. So during the time, the 6 years time is actually very, very short in constructing buildings during the time, no? The old era, the Byzantine architecture. So that means Justinian, as an emperor, devoted a lot of time, a lot of resources, a lot of money para lang mapaprove niya nga those buildings or that church nga inyong gibungkag during that riot nga wa mo ni believe na ko as an emperor, I will recreate it again and make it as a landmark of Byzantine or currently Istanbul. So mo na as mindset ni Justinian. So here, if you noticed, when completed, it was the largest and most imposing church in the world. It took a lot of years nga usap pa ni siya na ang iyang record na absent. So if you compare to the highest during that time is actually the pyramids. But actually ang pyramid in Egyptian naman na siya, gi-exclude na siya sa katong tallest amongst all. So based on the structures na gigamit as kanang used for people, bali public structures, this Hagia Sophia, pila ka years nga siya nagkupot sa tallest building. So yan ka grandeur, yan ka spectacular ang Hagia Sophia. So holding prestigious title until the Ottoman conquest of the Byzantine capital. So during the downfall of the Byzantine capital or the Byzantine era, kani siya nga church na transform ni siya into a mosque. So gihimo ni siyang mosque. So from Christianity or Christian church, nahimong mosque for the Muslims, and currently himo na siyang museum. And still wala gyapon na usab, walay na guba. And knowing Turkey mag-earthquake na to, not the same with Japan or Philippines, but they also experience earthquakes in Turkey. And knowing old type of construction ang ilahang gibuhat pa ani nga sa una. And also knowing the time, 6 years pagbuhat sa building. during the time other churches maabot sila mga 20 years and so on and so forth. Uban maabot gani mga almost 50 to create a church. But this one ingana ka devoted si Emperor Justinian para pag-create ani nga spectacular building. So how did it started? Yun sa pag materialize. So this one mo ni siya if you search Emperor Justinian during the time in internet, walay picture nga makuha during the time niya, no? So na is ang mga mosaics na ngayon yung makita sa internet. So he is very inspired sa building sa Rome, which is what we call Pantheon. So grabe gid siya ka-inspired, no? Because this is one of the buildings in Rome nga murag palahi. All buildings here within this area is square in plan, rectangular, and so on and so forth. But this one, it has a dome and circular in plan. So ganahan siya yung ani nga type sa building or building form. So he thinks nga if you have a circular plan, maka-create kag dome, but your plano or your space is limited to circle. So he wanted nga ang early Christian type of plan, the basilican plan, the rectangular plan, must be or can be incorporated with a dome. Balay yung ano na, ang mga early Christian churches, how could it be na pwede na pagbutangan o dome? So, kani siya, makita niyo, this is the one that was showed on the video, no? Giunsa pag huna-huna ni Justinian nga from a basilican plan. If you remember, no? Apse, this one is the apse. Nave here. Giunsa niya pag-incorporate nga naka-create sila ani nga type of architecture, which is the Byzantine architecture with the domes. So, nga ni, no? From the basilican plan, na ay dome sa tunga. Okay. So this one, it's a 3D model of the Byzantine, during Byzantine architecture, 3D model of the Hagia Sophia. So makita ninyo dome, di ba? And the plan or ang floor plan niya is squarish or rectangular in form. Okay, so this part right here, if you can see my laser, no, kanang red na dot, that part is the pendentive. This one. And if you notice here, there's a small portion. What do you call this one? This is the drum. So if na kay drum, you don't have to provide a lantern. Why? Because this drum, muna na siya nag, if I may, that drum right here, muna na siya naghatag o natural lighting within the interior of your church. Okay, so again, no, that's the reason why Hagia Sophia doesn't have a lantern. It's because this drum right here supports the need of natural lighting. Okay, so lighted na siya diri sa. And they said that this windows right here, kani siyang windows kanang nay arrow, nakakuha ako sa arrow. It makes the space lighter. Diba? Kaya if, for example, if imo na siyang i-enclose, like wala ni siya nga windows, tanawan ni mo sa taas, bugat ka na siya tanawon ang dome. But since there's openings right here, kita ni mo mga openings, and napag-light nga musod, it makes the space, makes this dome lighter. Lighter in terms of feeling, ha? Not the weight itself. Okay, so what's the use of this? If you notice, if we go back a few slides, kani, what's the use of this? Sir, daghana gura ng tapad-tapad ano niya, diba? The main part of the Hagia Sophia is this one. Mugana siya ang main portion. Below that one is the nave, the main part of the church. But if you can see here, daghan kay siyang mga extensions, extensions and so on and so forth. Ay sorry, sobran. Here, makita nimo na yung mga extensions and so on and so forth. Here we have here the extensions. Why? Nganong naa siya extensions? In that video, they tried to recreate this dome. Ilang gi-create nga dome, at the same time ilang nang gi-create kani nga arc. But before sila niabot sa dome, ilang sang gi-create ang arc. When they created this arc, and they tested it with several weights, bungkag ang arc, no? Murag they tried to limit it in a several bags of cement. I think ilang limit is I think moabot sila og mga 7 bags. Pagbutang nila sa bag, nabungkag ang arc. So that means there's something wrong sa ilang gibuhat sa ilahang miniature. Kataw na sila mga historians, it's not the builders long ago. It's the new historians that studies how they've created this Hagia Sophia dome. So they determine nga that is why naani siya nga mga parts sa church, because these parts actually supports the arches, the pendentives, and the dome itself. So if you notice those extensions right there, the semi-dome, if you notice, or if you remember on our parts of the church or the visual dictionary of architecture terms, this is the semi-dome. And the use of that semi-dome is actually to hold all of this part right here. Murag sila mo'y nagpugong. No. Again, no? If you notice, this dome right here is quite big. And if you don't have this buttresses, the term is buttresses. If you don't have this buttress right here, if you don't have this dome right here, bungkag ni siya. No one would support this big dome in this kind of construction. So this part right here gives an inward force and contains the dome and the base together, including the pendentives. So again, no, 6 years lang nila pag-build ani, and lahat or most of their funds were used para lang ani nga building. So ingana ka dedicated si Emperor Justinian for this building. So if you notice sa interior, this is a kaning new picture na ni siya. Makita nimo na ni siya yung mga, these are the times na gi-invade na siya or gihimo na siya nga mosque. So what do they do is ilang gipang tabunan ang mga old murals with this one. Mo na ni ang mga gipang add-on during the time nga nahimong mosque ang Hagia Sophia. Okay, so if you read this one, makita nimo ni siya sa, or you would have this as the unsay mga definitions on this part of the building. So for the other pictures, if you notice, this is the openings right here that provide lighting within the main part of the church. So if you notice, no, mo ni siya ang lighting, and try to visualize what if wala na siya nga windows or wala na siya nga part, bugat kayo, and medyo wala kay makita nga interior or natural lighting here sa center. So with the addition of this one, actually night term na nila, gitawag na sila og kanang ano nga dome, naglutaw. So another picture right here, ingana, no, it's a top view. So if murag naka sa ubos, nagpicture ka, makita nimo ang dome, ang main dome itself. And this part right here, these are the pendentives. And after this one here, those are the semi-domes. So those semi-domes, mo to siya nag-hold sa gibugaton na niya, the weight of the overall or the main dome of the Hagia Sophia. Okay, so hopefully matanaw niyo itong video, no? The documentary of the Hagia Sophia. It's quite interesting to watch. Another example here is Basilica of Saint Apollinaire Nouveau. So this one is not actually Byzantine architecture. It's not actually an example of Byzantine architecture, but it was included in this presentations because the construction started during early Christian architecture. The design was made during early Christian architecture, but it was finished during the Byzantine architecture. Yan nakadugay ang pag-create. So again, no, 475 to 526. Because Byzantine architecture nag-start around 500. So again, no, the UNESCO heritage structure na sa siya, and itawag siya early Christian monuments. So if you notice, simple ang exterior, and unsay iyang added feature nga mahug siya nga partly Byzantine architecture is this roof right here. Dili makita aning other picture or here, but this one here is a partly dome na ni siya. Domical structure right here. Another view, that one, no? Since circular siya, actually this is the drum itself, extended drum. Ibutang din sila dome. But this dome is quite small. Gamay ra kani siya. Another example is the Hagia Irene, so or Hagia Irene, which means holy, no? Hagia means holy. So Hagia Irene is one of the earliest churches built in the Byzantine capital. So it was commissioned by Constantinople's founder. So, but unfortunately, the original church was destroyed during the Nika riots. So again, no, ang Hagia Irene, nag-start siya during the early Christian, pero completely, aside from Hagia Sophia, Hagia Irene was also destroyed during the Nika riots. So in 532. So they reconstructed it and adjusted a little bit on the plan. So again, this is an example of Byzantine architecture. If you notice, the archways, the dome on drums, the materials used, exterior, is quite simple. So if you look at the plan, yan na yung plano. So you can see a lot of differences from the Byzantine architecture to the early Christian architecture. So simple lang yung exterior, but if you look at the interior, a lot of murals, a lot of paintings, inyong makita. Okay, so na mga yan ang paintings. And right now, sa mga recent pictures, yung nag-view. So going back, in terms of characteristics, no? If we check on the characteristics, simple sa building, sir. Ano lang, bricks yung sa tanawon. Bricks, nalay windows, may dome at the center. So that's an example of Byzantine architecture. Simple, using arches for the openings, such as doors and windows. It has a dome at the center. May dome sa tunga. The plan is octagonal. Here, the nave. And they have a lavish interior or well-ornamented interior. Another example is Church of Saint Catherine. So the Church of Saint Catherine in the old town of Thessaloniki, Greece, is one of the most beautiful preserved Byzantine churches, even though it served as a mosque for much of its existence. So the exact time of its construction is unknown, but it has been dated to the period of Palaiologos dynasty that ruled the Byzantine Empire from 1261 until its downfall in 1453. So again, this is an example of Byzantine architecture. But this one is actually late na niya. there's a part man good of Byzantine architecture that's early Byzantine, which is gamay ra na siya og timeline difference from the early Christian architecture. We have the mid and also the late. So this one, part na siya sa late Byzantine architecture. So another view of that building. So makita niyo nagyapon siya ay gamay nga dome sa tunga. So again, no, what are the two buildings for Byzantine architecture? Church and monastery. So an example of a monastery is the Daphne Monastery. So as part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Daphne Monastery is another outstanding example of the so-called cross in square plan. Okay, so the current monastery and church were built in the 11th century. So affected niya po niya siya during the riot actually, but some of these parts ilan ang gipang reconstruct. So nanay mga reconstruction nga ning evolve in this Daphne Monastery. So as I've mentioned, this is what you call Middle Byzantine architecture. So same gyapon no ang ilahang plano, cross in square, plans is in cross, dome at the central part, radiating cross arms, barrel vaulted, the term is vaulted, and vaulted corner units. Okay, so an example of that Middle Byzantine architecture is this church, the Mary Leon Church or the Bodrum Mosque. So from a church, convert na siya into a mosque. So this part right here, muna na siya ang nahog nga octagon domed. The term octagon domed, muna na siya na octagonal in plan. So sa plano niya para octagonal. So here, sectional views. So yung nga ni baliklas ang inyong buhaton sa inyong skis. You have a floor plan. You will draw it like this. Sketching lang, no? Sketching lang. Pen and ink. And draw the section. So you have to include the parts. So asa ang nave, asa ang narthex, asa ang apse, asa ang bema, transept, and so on and so forth. And you have to include the elevation section. So in the section, you have to include also the parts. So asa ang lantern, asa ang dome, asa ang pendentive, and so on and so forth. Asa ang mga columns, piers, capitals, samples of mga murals, asa nila gipang butang, mga ornaments, and so on and so forth. Another example is the Theotokos Church in Hosius Laukas. So if you notice, same gyapon, no? Very, very minimal in terms of exterior design. So very simple in terms of exterior. They always use arc openings. So their doors, their windows openings are in arches. They always have that dome, kaning dome sa portion. And then makita nimo og unsa ilang material nga gamit, like for this one, bricks. Bricks ina gigamit, no? And partly sa bottom part ni gamit sila stones. So again, no, what material they use? Mora sa na mo makita silang exterior. They don't use paints. They don't ornament it. Wala sila gipang add-on nga mga ornaments, was sila gipang add-on nga details, and so on and so forth. But if you go into its interior, it's quite intricate. No? Nangat to ang ilahang mga murals, ornaments, and so on and so forth. All of their decorations will be found in the interior part of the church. So if there's a middle Byzantine architecture, nasa gitawag og late Byzantine architecture. But this late Byzantine architecture is partly ano na siya, partly nagsugod na og ka-downfall ang Byzantine. But still they use the ideas from the modern or from the local design of that Byzantine churches. So for example, no, the Hagia Sophia, Hagia Irene, all of those characteristics sa ilang building, ilang gikuha, and then included ani nga mga buildings or structures during the late Byzantine architecture. So, unsa inyo makita, you can still see the arches, very simple in terms of exterior design. Why you can say it's simple? It's because they use the facade in a way nga unsa imong material. Say, for example, you're using stones right here at the bottom part, bricks on your arc openings. So, makita nimo siya. They don't plaster it, they don't cover it, they don't provide cladding just like what we are doing right now. So sa mga buildings na to, puro cladding, puro mga aluminum cladding. So kung sa imong materials, makita nimo dayon. And they always have domes. Nagid na sila dome. So Pantanasa, it's actually a monastery somewhere in Greece. So another view, ingana no. Medyo na siya sa hill or hilly or mountainous portion. This one, still Byzantine architecture, but this one late na siya, late Byzantine architecture. So very simple in terms of its exterior design, arc, and then there's a dome at the center. So that's the main characteristics again, no? Dome, arc, very simple in its exterior, and vertical siya, no? This one, it's composed of 1, 2, 3, 4 floors. Compared sa iyang surroundings nga gagmay ra kay mga building. So, mo stand out yun ang mga buildings during the Byzantine architecture. And lastly, mo na iyahang interior. No? Mo na ang iyahang kanang interior part sa dome. So imagine, no, if ikaw ang painter nga ni-paint na ng kanang sa dome itself, kalisod i-paint na, di ba? Okay. So far, any questions? So nahuman na nato ang Byzantine architecture. And hopefully, naara mo'y nakuha ng mga info. Wait here, I have it. Okay. So far, guys, any questions? Okay, floor plan. And one section only. You can't find a section, but there's an elevation. Yes, if you have questions. Go ahead.
Sir, wala ra kay title block or any requirement?
Wala ra. For the title block, for the unsa ninyo pag-layout sa inyo sketches, you have the freedom to how to do it. What else? Wait, natay question isa. May nag-open sa mic. Wait lang. Any questions? Si Abigail. Yes, any type of paper. Any type of paper. Yes, separate paper, floor plan, and then separate paper section. Yes, detailed in a way nga maklaro ang parts. So makita nimo asa ang lantern, makita nimo asa ang mga, like for example sa floor plan, makita nimo asa ang narthex, apse, nave, and so on and so forth. Not necessarily scaled. No? Lisod kayo ipangita og scale during that time. Not necessarily scaled. Not necessarily scaled. Again, not necessarily scaled. What else? Ang
Sir,
sa inyo?
both ang butang label, sir. Or okay ra ang plan view ra ngan og labels.
Both na labels. Yes. The instructions are in Moodle, but let me transfer it in MS Teams. You will submit it in MS Teams. I really can't provide rubric in Moodle. I don't know how to do it. So ako siya i-transfer sa MS Teams. Pero pwede nyo i-check sa Moodle ang instruction and so on and so forth, ang deadline, but you will submit it in MS Teams. Mas nindot og interface ang MS Teams. Okay. What else? Still have 10 minutes. Hopefully, guys, ma-distinguish rin ninyo ang early Christian and Byzantine architecture. Kanang ipakitaan mo picture ba? Okay. Early Christian sir. Or okay. Byzantine architecture. So again, no? Ang early Christian, very, very rectangular. And then yung roofing is naka-truss. Wala kay makitang dome ever in early Christian architecture. Asa niyo makita ang dome? You can see the dome in Byzantine architecture. So ngadto na sila nag-start og domes. Nganong nag-dome sila, inspired kaayo si Justinian sa Pantheon. If you want with color, it would be good. But if di kaya, you can have it in pen and ink. Pero if ganahan mo, like, sir, maikay ko mo render, sir, kanang watercolor, maikay ko, sir. Pwede akong i-color. Yes, why not? Yes. Wala pa na ako na-share din, no? Sorry. I should have shared this one sa PowerPoint last time, but I think I forgot to share it. I will share it. Don't worry. I will share it after our meeting. Yes, it could be late Byzantine, early or middle Byzantine. It could be any Byzantine type of church na makuha ninyo as reference. And make sure na siya tong mga parts, no, nga nindot nga mga parts. So again, the rationale why we have this skis is to familiarize you guys on the parts of the churches. So wala lang ako siya gihatag during the early Christian because in early Christian architecture, it's quite simple and you can't find any examples about early Christian churches. Medyo lisod kay pangitawan ang mga examples during early Christian architecture. So you can find in the internet, in books about Byzantine architecture, a lot of references that you can get. And most of the churches have the same parts. So dili mo maglisod like kaninga church kay walay nave ay posible sa siguro walay nave, no, because that's the most important part or the central part of the church. So for me, mas better, mas daghan mong parts na ma-introduce sa inyong sketches, mas better. Because that's the essence, that's the rationale of the sketching for you guys to familiarize the parts of the church, which is mostly mo na siya ang dapat ninyo ma-familiarize, dapat ninyo put into your heart and ma-remember ninyo later on when you review in your board exam. Kaya yan na naman gid, no? The history of architecture subject, duha yung purpose. Mainly, it's part of the board exam, ang history of architecture. Part siya sa board exam, and one for me, no, sa ko ang di kay ko mubasa or di kay ko mubasa og historical books. It's quite hard for me ang kana siya nga subject. And the other part, duha mo na siya. The other part is the other purpose of this subject is actually researching what had happened before, what are the developments before during their time, like during their era. Unsay ilang gipang buhat, how do they create their architectural type, and how do they applied it in a way nga we can use those type of skills, type of designs during our time today or during our era, which is the contemporary. Say for example lang, Byzantine architecture. During Byzantine architecture, sikat kayo ang dome. But nowadays, you cannot create a dome like what they did on Hagia Sophia. Hindi nakaka-create og nga na nga type of dome gamit kag bricks nato karon or mo gamit kag cement, then maghimo kag dome nga same sa Hagia Sophia kay gabi inspired ko sa Hagia Sophia, Brad, no? Maghimo ko kuan balay nya na dome sa to nga pinahagya Sophia. You cannot really do the same type of construction on what they did on the Hagia Sophia. So what can you do? Like, how can you apply the history of architecture on your new design? So you have to research it. Diyon sa nila paghimo sa una, and how can I innovate it? How can I use this? How can I use this material that I have now and replicate what's the form during the old times? And that's what Buckminster Fuller does. Muna game on ni Buckminster Fuller. Buckminster Fuller created a geodesic dome. So geodesic dome, from the term itself dome, and geodesic or geometry, gamit siya og triangles. So from the triangles, and so on and so forth. Those triangles, daghan kayong triangles, it created a dome. And that dome, kanang mga triangles nga dome, it could be covered with glass, could be covered with polycarbonates, and those domes, which is same sa kaning comment ni Jessame, it could be the, for example, if you're designing a mall, the center of the mall, it could be a geodesic dome, and within that dome makita ni mga to ang central part of that mall nga ngadto mag-gather siguro tanan, ay mga open spaces, 'di ba? Gardens, 'di ba? So that's the other part of, or that's the other use of history of architecture. And that's quite interesting if you try it the other way. Kaya mag-uban nga sa mukha sa history of architecture, sige man tag basa aning mga, or sige man tag sketch aning mga karaan nga building. What's the use of this? So that's the use of it. Try to think what have they done before and how can I innovate it during this time using these new technologies and using these new materials. Gets na guys? Gets rin ninyo? Okay, so if you don't have any questions, pwede na to i-end. We can end our class, and next meeting we will start with Romanesque architecture, and siguro mga same what we've done in our previous quiz. Natay gamayng break and then mag-quiz ta on the last part of the class. Siguro sayon raman tong quiz siguro. Nauban nga after 4 minutes ni submit na. So last sayon ra kay akong quiz. So maybe we can have a 20-minute quiz. Okay, so thank you everyone and have a good day.
Thank you, sir. God bless, sir.
Thank you,
sir.
Keep safe everyone. Stay at home ra gyud ha. Stay at home.
Kaon na niya, sir.
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.